Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I am currently reading, everything I finished in the past week, and everything I'm looking forward to reading in the upcoming week. So I think this is going to be a very book leaning week. I don't have a ton to talk about from my actual week, and my piles have gotten a bit out of control. You will see when we get there in terms of the actual books that I have this week. But beyond the piles, I'm getting too excited about this upcoming month in April and all the things I want to read and get done. So I have multiple other piles that I'm not even going to show you today that are intended for next month. So we're going to have to really blaze through some of these. So let's talk about books I finished this week. Let's start there. First, I finished The Light of Eaglefriend, and this is by C.L. Murray. This is the fourth and final book in an epic high fantasy series. It's pretty traditional in style, and it's a self-published series that I've actually beta read the whole thing, and I've really enjoyed beta reading it. It's not my typical, I don't read a lot of the sort of very standard fantasy, but this is that, and it also has a lot of nuance to it. So I can't talk a ton about the fourth book, but as a series, it has been fun to watch it grow from the first book that was really the outcast turns hero story with a journey, I think akin a bit to The Hobbit. You would probably see similarities there, but the series, the Eaglefriend series, of course means we have a race of eagles that are giant, rideable mounts, and they're also sentient and able to talk. But they don't particularly like humans initially. And obviously we have Eaglefriend, who forms a bond with the eagles. So that's sort of the simple start to the story in book one, but it has really expanded out, and we've gotten a lot more nuance in the characters. So starting from book two, we had much more complexity to those characters and a lot more depth in terms of their internal motivations and some internal conflicts that were going on. So as we've progressed on, we went from one generation to the next generations in the third and fourth book. And in book four, we're fully moved on to who were children in book two, being adults now, and they're kind of taking over the reins from this earlier generation and figuring out how to deal with the big bad of this world. So there's been a lot of development there. And in this fourth book, the conflict has really grown. There aren't massive, battles going on, but there's internal conflicts between the characters, and there's a lot of magical influence of the big bad of this world on these characters that's creating interpersonal conflicts. And it's the stakes of this big bad influencing everyone that really, really pushes it along. So I enjoyed that aspect. I think this has shown me how much things can change from a draft version to a final version, because in the previous beta reads that I did along the way, I did start reading with the beta version alongside the published version, and didn't see a ton of change. But this final book, I decided to skip doing that because I have seen so little change in the previous ones. This time around, I immediately could tell there were a lot of changes. So it really came out very polished. It was polished before from an editing standpoint, in terms of the copy editing, but here I think really tightened up the final version of the story that was published from where it was in the draft stage. So that was really fun to see kind of it become a more cohesive thing. There were a couple of things that kept coming up that were bothering me in the draft that wound up getting really ironed out in the final version. So that was fun. So it's been fun to go along on this journey of reading this story, this big epic fantasy that's got some classic elements, but incorporated some gray morality as it went along. And the betrayals and interpersonal dynamics growing over this last book really, really played out well for me. There's one thing to the last part of this series that I really didn't like, and it was a choice. It was definitely a choice about one of not the big bad, but the secondary villain character that I didn't love in book 3 and 4. And I just didn't find it believable, unfortunately. And again, as I said, it was a choice in terms of how the author wanted to go. It's fine. I think for most traditional fantasy type readers, it's gonna work just fine. For me, it got to me the whole time. I was just not buying into it. So that was it in terms of negatives, though. I think this was a great end to the series. Then I read Foster by Claire Keegan, and this was a tiny slip of a novella. It's less than 100 pages, and it's actually smaller than this because they tacked on like 2-3 chapters of small things like these at the end. So I got to the end and was like, what? There's another 25 pages. Nope, it was the end. So this is so edited down and minimalist in terms of the writing, but it's doing so much with that very light text. There's nothing to this. This is about a girl who is sent away from her family to go stay with some relatives that she doesn't really know. And that's it. That's the story. I felt like there was going to be something ominous to this, and there really isn't. We quickly are learning that she is this girl who is from a large family, and her mother is pregnant yet again. And so her parents are kind of overwhelmed, and they have challenges in their life. So that's why she's been sent away till her mother gives birth. And she comes to stay with these other people that they're total strangers to her. And so she slowly does get to know them, and they really care for her as she is there. And so we're hearing and learning, processing what her life was like before and what her life is like here. But more importantly, what I think we get out of this in this very quiet, slim novel from this sort of innocent child who doesn't fully grasp what all's been going on in her life, we get that everyone really has challenges and difficulties, no matter how put together they seem or who they are. Everyone's going through something in this small rural Irish village that she's in. And so I think that was the most interesting aspect, because we are in this child perspective in first person, and so it's very immersed into her head, and that she doesn't really have a full grasp of everything. And I loved the way that it captured that. So it was a very introspective to this character, but it didn't age her up. Like, it genuinely does feel like this young child. And I think that was the strongest aspect of this. The writing is so, as I said, it's kind of minimalist. It's very restrained and kept down to just the words it needs. And that's why I think Keegan is becoming such a loved writer and writes such slim little works that pack a punch, because the writing really feels like she has chosen every word going into this. So I enjoyed it very much. There was nothing to it. It's completely a slice of this little girl's life, of one summer spent with these people and the connections that she makes and the things she comes to understand. So really, really enjoyed it. Then I read Nona the Ninth. It's Too Shiny by Tamsyn Muir. This is the third in the Locked Tomb series, and Nona here is a delight, as well as Noodle, the little dog here, or kind of dog. Anyway, so this was great. I loved this, especially because I did both audio and print together, and I just like went all into this of sitting there and listening and reading at the same time, and I pretty much was reading nothing else but focusing on this till I finished it. I adored it. The audio specifically, I do have to say, Moira Quirk is an immense audio narrator. She's so good. But for this, like, I'm blown away by the audio performance for this, because she does characters. The voices all have their own accents, very unique, completely different accents for everyone, and it's like a whole performance. It's so vivid and visual. Like, the characters are fully realized. That I'm someone with aphantasia, so I don't imagine anything when I read, and with this, it was so cinematic and like playing in my head. It was so real. So yeah, this was just a very visual, vivid experience of doing the audio and the print together. But what's it about? I can't really tell you, because this is the third book in what has been a very confusing series. It's so hard to talk about any part of this, other than that we are sort of in a dystopian this time. The previous books have all been very different. We learned in the first book that our main characters there were in a competition to get this magical power, and we learned a lot about what is lictorhood, and it was also a locked manor house in space type of mystery, a murder mystery where people keep dropping like flies. So that was book 1. And we came out of that and into book 2, which is really a lot about processing trauma and is incomprehensible to me. I literally could not tell you what happened in book 2 other than processing trauma. It's so confusing. This book then is very straightforward. We're in a dystopia. We're following this character, Nona, as she's super naive and innocent. A huge portion is just her perceiving the world and not knowing what's happening in her life. A little bit like our previous book, but not quite. But Nona is just so upbeat. She loves everyone. She's so unguarded. And so she's surrounded by a group of people who are taking care of her and protecting her. She also goes to school, and a lot of this is just her going to school and delighting in the other kids at school, things like that. So how does that play into the series? I can't tell you. I think what is so fantastic about this is Tamsyn Muir writes group dynamics really, really well. So both the dynamic of Nona with the people that she lives with who are kind of protecting her and teaching her, that dynamic is so great. And again, every character here is so wildly different that the back and forth between them is what it wins it for me. So the school friends as well, I just adored the interactions between all of these characters at her little school group. And it's not just her with the other kids. She has kind of her own clique that all banter off of each other, but also the interactions with the teachers at the school and the adult-child dynamics are so well played out. Like, Tamsyn Muir really gets those group dynamics down so amazingly. So on top of that, Nona is just such an amazing character on her own because she's seeing things through these very naive eyes, and she always wants to see the best in people, and she's, as I said, so unguarded. She just wants everyone to be her friend. And so she's such a character you can get behind immediately. But on top of that, we basically have gone from the first book having a lot of magic, but it being very shadowy and like we don't really know. It's very hand-wavy, mysterious sort of magic. To this book, now we have so much more knowledge about the magic. We learned a lot about the background and how lictorhood works, as well as sort of turning it almost into a hard magic. So we've gone from understanding nothing about how this magic works to it feeling very completely fleshed out in this book. And we really know where it came from. I loved that. And everything else I feel like I can't talk about because this was such a great execution of bringing together threads from the previous 2 books into something, but you not having any way to have possibly foreseen it. And also feeling like it was actually a plan, not just, surprising us with something that couldn't be predicted at all. This feels like it was very well plotted from the beginning. Like, probably Tamsyn Muir had ideas of where this was all going when she started writing. And I love it. I just loved everything about this. This was easily my favorite of this particular series, I would say, and probably a new favorite. I'm definitely going to be looking to get to the 4th book as soon as it comes out. Yeah, I just am so looking forward to the end because this has put it on my radar thinking that, this has to come to a massive climax, and seeing how she wraps it up is going to be amazing. And finally, yet another wonderful one. This is Magic for Liars by Gailey. For some reason, I was thinking this was on my 5-star predictions. It was not. But I did have this on my 2021 TBR and never got to it, so I'm glad to be finally getting to it. I also mentioned in my authors I read the most from last year in 2022 that Sarah Gailey is an author I want to like really dig into finishing up their back catalog, because I think I have this and 2 other novels and 1 short work to read, and then I will have read everything that Gailey has put out. So this one is kind of noirish. It's contemporary fantasy, but with a strong murder mystery element. We literally have a non-magical private investigator. Ivy Gamble is our main character and our perspective character. And her sister, Tabitha, teaches at a magic school. So Ivy is recruited by someone else, not her sister, to come and help them investigate this death that was ruled an accident, a magic accident, of course. And the people at the school think there's something more to it, that it maybe was not an accident. So I feel like that summary, everybody lays that out when they talk about this book. But that's all you need to know. That's all there is to the plot, really. This is not about the plot. And some people, I think, had problems with Gailey's other book, The Echo Wife, for similar reasons, because you get this elevator pitch that sounds like it's going to be really plot forward, and it's not. It's really interior to the character. And I think that's what Gailey does really, really well. To talk about yet another book without starting to talk about this one, River of Teeth is probably the most plotty of their work that I've read, but it's ostensibly about this crew getting together for a caper, but it's much more about this character processing having been wronged and wanting revenge and sussing out the right people to bring in for the crew. So it's much more interior to the character. And that's the case here. So what this is much more about is Ivy and her feelings of inadequacy from, you know, her being this teenager who was normal, non-magical, and having experienced those feelings of inadequacy with her sister. And now she's coming into the school and feeling all that over again. It's just pulling her right back to being a teen who felt like an outcast, and realizing that the teenagers here, just because they're magical, they're not special or different, or, you know, they don't have it all together in the way that she thought they would. They're still just teenagers, and, you know, they're going through all of the difficulties of coming of age and maturing, but not fast enough, all of that. And she's the adult now. And so she's readjusting her understanding of who she is and her place here. So I loved the exploration there. It actually reminded me a ton of The Magicians, not in the really jaded, you know, difficult character that Quentin is from The Magicians, but in the same way, he's dealing with something like that at the beginning, where he feels that similar level of inadequacy, that he feels like if he just had magic, he would fit in. And this has a really similar vibe to who Ivy is, who she feels she was as a teenager. So I love that. And it also is tackling some really heavy topics. There is a lot about like loss of family members. There's a lot about illness, and birth control comes up throughout as a big element because they're dealing with these teenagers. It's kind of a constant that she's talking to these people, and they are like, yeah, I mean, that's just something we have to deal with, even though, you know, we're at a magical school, like, we have to give out condoms to the kids, you know? Things like that are a really big element to this. And that was interesting to see them play into the aspects of teenage life so much. So overall, this is not about the plot as much as it is about the exploration of the individual character of Ivy. And she even does discuss feeling like she's different versions of herself, and talks about that in a kind of literal way, even though it's not. She's not like magically splitting herself or anything. She just is presenting herself in different ways depending on how she feels she contextualizes herself in that moment. And so I found that really, really interesting in the way that was laid out. as far as the mystery and plot element, I did love the mystery to this, and I think the smartest thing that was done in terms of the mystery is that Gailey threw in so many of the different trope characters that you are meant to look at or you would think is the potential criminal. And Gailey has you looking in all directions to try and figure out who the obvious villain is, and you just can't guess it, I don't think. So really well executed mystery. So I'm glad I actually squeezed this one in as one I've been meaning to get to for a long time and squeaked it in for March Mystery Madness. Then as always, we have the massive pile that I have been working at. Byzantium by Stephen R. Lawhead. It looks like I haven't read anything, and I've read over 100 pages. So this is a big chunky mammoth. I'm just happy to make progress. I've just started Redwall. I am still working on my 2 short fiction reads, and those are Tales from Gavagans Bar and The Best of World SF, Volume 2. So those are what I'm currently reading. Now, let's talk about the pile that I got from the library. I picked up a whole bunch of 2022 novellas, and these are, of course, almost all from Tor. I should have checked if they were all Tor. First, Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This one is kind of right on the line. I think by word count it's probably a novella. It's 221 pages, but there's a lot of space because it's alternating chapters very often, and there are new sections multiple times, so there's a lot of empty pages. So I think that one might be novella length. We have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, a horror based on the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and I love T. Kingfisher, of course. Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. This is, I think, like an Angels and Demons noirish, and also a romance, I think. A Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse, another angel-y one. And finally, Sisters of the Forsaken Stars by Lena Rather. This is the second in a novella duology, I think, so I'll be finishing a series with this. And this is Nuns in Space. I really enjoyed the first one, so I'm hoping this one holds up. So those, I happen to have a couple days off. My work is weird. We don't get Easter anymore. They replaced it with giving us a personal day instead of a holiday, and so we can use the personal day whenever. And so I'm taking a couple extra days off for some downtime, doing taxes, some random things I wanted to get done, and also reading. So I'm hoping to finish at least 3 of these. Moonshot, I would love to get all 5, but hoping for 3 finished this week in my downtime. We will see. So that would put me in a really good spot in terms of novellas for voting in the Hugo's nominations. So yeah, my to get to pile is overflowing. And that's not even getting into the stuff I have lined up for April. I already have many things lined up for April, so I really need to get through this backlog. Anyway, so other stuff, I think really only I have watching stuff to talk about, and I think the only thing I finished this week was season 4 of You, and it was okay. I think I mentioned last week that I didn't really like the decision it had taken to kind of do a closed circle murder mystery format in season 4. I didn't like that. I didn't like the end of the season at all. I really hated the way that it went there. So yeah, overall, great performances, I think, from everyone involved in the sort of small group that becomes the murder mystery crew, but didn't like it at all. I think the first season was really the height of the series, unfortunately, and it's gone all downhill from there. So I think that's it for me today. I don't have any recommendations for you. I'm so far behind on watching other people's videos. I am watching a lot still, but I'm like 2 weeks behind currently. And I have way more than that. It's 2 weeks. That's past 2 weeks. I think last I looked, I have videos in my queue all the way back to about 10 months ago. And I've been trying to throw in a few of the really old ones and watch them and decide if I want to remove them, if they're no longer relevant, that kind of stuff. Like readathon announcements, I probably don't need to watch, from 10 months ago. TBRs I do still watch. still want to see what people wanted to read 10 months ago, but like, yeah, filtering through at that old is difficult. So I think otherwise, as I said, I've got a couple days off, so it's going to be fairly low-key, just getting boring stuff done. Not anything really super fun. I am going to try to get out and do some stuff if it's not too rainy, because we are fully into spring. So it's allergies and rain really keeping me from wanting to be outside. But I do want to try and get out because we do finally have some kind of nice weather. We're up into the 60s to low 70s some days. It's still been too cold for me to actually put my plants outside because overnight we're still getting down almost to freezing. So I'm hoping for some nice warmer weather in the upcoming week now that we are officially in spring. I think that is it for my week. Hopefully this was not too rambly and all over the place, but I think I at least got in the books, and that's what you care about. So thanks all for watching.